The weight of success. Damian Cross sat in the leather chair of his downtown office, staring at the rejection email that had just cost him $15 million. At 35, he had built Crosstech Industries from a garage startup into one of the most innovative companies in the country. His software solutions powered hospitals, universities, and corporations across 3 continents. Yet none of that mattered to the board members at Hamilton Enterprises, who had just declined his merger proposal with a single damning phrase written in the polite language of business: "We have concerns about long-term stability and commitment to partnerships," the email read. And Damian knew exactly what they meant. They were questioning his personal life, not his professional credentials. In the conservative world of corporate mergers, being unmarried at his age signaled instability. It suggested someone who couldn't commit, someone unreliable, someone who might abandon ship when challenges arose. The irony burned like acid in his chest, because his singular focus on building his company was precisely why he had no time for relationships. A desperate solution. 3 days later, Damian found himself in the upscale coffee shop called Meridian Brew, waiting to meet someone his executive assistant had recommended for what felt like an insane solution. The idea had come from his assistant sister, who worked in event planning and had mentioned unusual professional arrangements people made for appearances. Damian had dismissed it initially, but after losing another potential partnership, desperation had taken hold. When Sienna Hayes walked through the door, she was nothing like what he had imagined. Instead of the polished, calculating woman he had expected, she wore paint-splattered jeans and a simple blue sweater. Her honey-brown hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and there was dried clay under her fingernails. She carried a portfolio case and moved with the uncertain grace of someone uncomfortable in business settings. "Mr. Cross," she asked, approaching his corner table with visible nervousness. "I'm Sienna. Your assistant said you wanted to discuss some kind of arrangement," but she was vague about the details. Damian gestured to the seat across from him, studying her face as she sat down. There was something refreshingly honest about her expression. No practiced smile or calculated charm, just genuine curiosity mixed with wariness. "The proposal, I'll be direct," Damian began, watching her reaction carefully. "I need someone to be my wife for 1 year. Not a real marriage in the traditional sense, but a professional arrangement. You would attend business functions with me, present the image of a stable, committed partnership, and in return, I would provide significant financial compensation." Sienna's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "I'm sorry, did you just say you want to hire me to be your wife?" "It's purely business," Damian clarified quickly. "Separate living spaces in my home. No personal expectations. Complete privacy when we're not at public events. I've done extensive background research. You're a ceramic artist struggling financially, working at a cafe, teaching weekend pottery classes, and doing commissioned work when you can afford materials. This arrangement would give you a year to focus entirely on your craft." The artist's dilemma. Sienna set down her cup slowly, her mind racing through the implications. Everything he said was true. She was drowning in student loans from art school, barely making rent on her tiny studio apartment, and hadn't been able to afford quality clay in 6 months. The opportunity he was offering would change her life completely. Yet something about the coldness of the proposal disturbed her. "Why me?" she asked finally. "Surely there are women in your social circle who would jump at this opportunity." "That's exactly why not them," Damian replied. "They would expect it to become real or use the connection for their own advancement. You have your own dreams that don't involve climbing social ladders or trapping wealthy husbands. When you walked in here, you looked at me like I was just another person, not a bank account." Sienna laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You don't know anything about me. How can you be certain I won't fall for your lifestyle?" "Because you're arguing with me instead of immediately accepting what is objectively a generous offer," Damian said. "And because when you look at me, I don't see calculation in your eyes. I see someone who values authenticity over convenience." The decision silence stretched between them as Sienna wrestled with the decision. Part of her was screaming, that this was absurd, that pretending to love someone for money was morally questionable at best. But another part, the practical part, that was tired of choosing between groceries and art supplies, was calculating what a year of financial freedom could mean for her career. "I need time to think about this," she said finally. "This isn't something I can decide over coffee." "Of course," Damien replied, sliding a business card across the table. "I need an answer by Friday. There's an important gala next week where I need to present a united front." As Sienna gathered her portfolio and prepared to leave, she paused at the edge of the table. "Can I ask you something? Don't you want real love someday? Don't you want to get married for the right reasons?" Damien's expression hardened slightly, revealing a glimpse of old pain beneath his professional exterior. "I've seen what love does to people. My parents destroyed themselves in the name of love. I've watched brilliant colleagues make catastrophic decisions because of emotional attachments. Love is a luxury I can't afford, and frankly, I'm not sure it's worth the risk." "That's incredibly sad," Sienna said softly. "Real love shouldn't destroy people. It should make them better, stronger, more complete." After she left, Damien remained in the coffee shop, her words echoing in his mind with uncomfortable persistence. He had built his entire adult life on the principle that emotions were weaknesses to be managed and controlled. Yet something about Sienna Hayes had stirred feelings he thought he had successfully buried years ago. There was a lightness about her, a genuine warmth that seemed entirely untouched by cynicism. Sienna's reflection walking through the city streets back to her apartment. Sienna couldn't stop thinking about the strange proposal. The money he was offering would solve every financial problem she had. She could finally afford a proper studio space, quality materials, maybe even hire an assistant. She could spend 12 months doing nothing but creating art, building her portfolio, making connections in galleries without the constant stress of survival. But there was something about Damien Cross that unsettled her in ways she couldn't quite articulate, not in a dangerous way, but in a way that suggested this arrangement might not remain as simple and emotionless as he believed. She had seen the loneliness in his eyes, hidden beneath layers of confidence and control. She recognized it because she carried the same loneliness herself. The isolation that came from dedicating yourself entirely to your passion while everyone around you built conventional lives. That evening, she called her childhood friend Jade for advice. After explaining the entire situation, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "It sounds like a romance novel," Jade finally said. "Handsome billionaire offers to solve all your problems in exchange for pretending to be his wife. What's the catch?" "The catch is that it's not real," Sienna replied, staring at her latest ceramic piece, a bowl she had been working on for weeks. "And I'm not sure I can pretend to be in love with someone without it affecting me emotionally." "So you're already attracted to him?" Sienna was quiet for a moment, considering the truth of that statement. "He's not what I expected. There's something vulnerable about him, despite all that success and control. I think he's been hurt badly before, and he's using this arrangement to protect himself from being hurt again." "And you think you can help him?" Jade asked gently. "No, I don't want to fix him," Sienna said firmly. "But maybe I can show him that not all connections have to end in destruction. Maybe I can help him see that protecting yourself from pain also means protecting yourself from joy." By Friday, Sienna had made her decision. She called Damien's office and agreed to meet him that evening to finalize the details. When she arrived at his penthouse, she was overwhelmed by the elegance and scale of his home. Everything was beautiful but cold, like a museum rather than a place where someone actually lived. What surprised her most was the studio space he had already prepared in the wing that would be hers. High ceilings with perfect natural light, a professional potter's wheel, shelves stocked with quality clay and glazes, and large windows overlooking the city. He had done all of this before she even agreed. "You prepared all this before I gave you an answer?" she asked, genuinely touched by the gesture. Damien smiled slightly, an expression that transformed his entire face. "I was optimistic, and I thought that if you saw I was serious about supporting your work, you might be more inclined to accept. As they sat down to review the contract, Sienna found herself studying him more carefully. In his own space, he seemed different from the intimidating businessman she had met at the coffee shop. More human, more real, more vulnerable. "There's one thing I need to add to this agreement," she said, looking up from the papers his lawyers had prepared. "What's that?" "If either of us starts to develop real feelings, we need to be honest about it immediately. This arrangement only works if we're both committed to transparency. That means being upfront if the boundaries start to shift." Damien nodded, though something flickered in his eyes that suggested the boundaries might already be less clear than either of them wanted to admit. "Agreed. Anything else?" "Just one more thing. I want to be your partner in this, not just an employee playing a role. If I'm going to help you convince people we're happily married, I need to understand your world and the people in it. That means you have to trust me enough to let me in, at least a little bit." As Damien looked at this extraordinary woman who was about to turn his carefully ordered life upside down, he realized that his original plan to keep things simple and emotionless was already beginning to crumble. Sienna Hayes was unlike anyone he had ever met, and he suspected that by the time their year together was over, neither of their hearts would emerge unchanged. "Deal," he said, extending his hand to seal their agreement. When Sienna shook his hand, the contact sent an unexpected jolt through both of them, a preview of the complications and possibilities to come. Neither of them could have known in that moment that they had just made the most important decision of their lives, one that would transform them both in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Moving in 3 weeks had passed since Sienna Hayes signed the contract that would change her life. Moving into Damien Cross's penthouse had been surreal, like stepping into a different world where everything gleamed with expensive perfection. Her belongings looked small and shabby against the backdrop of marble floors and designer furniture, but the studio space he had created for her felt like a sanctuary. Every morning, she woke up in a bedroom rather than her entire previous apartment, still half expecting to find herself back in her cramped studio with the leaking ceiling. The routine they had established felt surprisingly natural. Damien left early for his office, always leaving a fresh cup of coffee outside her door with a small note about his schedule for the day. Sienna spent her mornings working with clay, her hands finally free to create without the constant anxiety of bills and survival. In the evenings, they would meet to prepare for their public appearances, practicing the choreography of their fictional marriage. "Remember," Damien had told her during one of their early rehearsals, "we met 8 months ago at the Riverside Gallery. You were displaying your ceramic work in a group exhibition. I was there because my company was sponsoring the event, but I stayed because your pieces caught my attention, and I was initially suspicious of you," Sienna added, getting into the rhythm of their invented history. "I thought you were just another wealthy collector looking for the next trendy artist to add to your portfolio. But you won me over by asking intelligent questions about my techniques and philosophies." The first major test, came at the annual Crossdeck Investor Gala, a glittering event where millions of dollars in deals were made over champagne and carefully crafted conversations. Sienna had spent days preparing, studying profiles of the key attendees, learning about Damien's business strategies, and practicing how to navigate conversations about technology she barely understood. Standing in front of the mirror in her bedroom, she adjusted the emerald green silk gown Damien's stylist had selected for her. It was the most expensive piece of clothing she had ever worn, and she felt like an imposter playing dress-up in someone else's life. "You look perfect," Damien said from the doorway, his voice carrying a warmth that went beyond mere approval. He wore his tuxedo with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to formal events, but there was something different in his eyes tonight. Nervousness, perhaps, or excitement. "I feel like a fraud," Sienna admitted, turning to face him. "What if I say something wrong? What if someone asks me a technical question about your business that I can't answer?" Damien crossed the room and took her hands gently in his. "Then you smile and say that your expertise is in art, not technology. Nobody expects you to understand every aspect of my business. They expect you to be yourself, which is exactly what makes you perfect for this." The performanceth gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Continental Hotel, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over hundreds of elegantly dressed guests. As they made their entrance, Sienna felt Damien's hand settle on the small of her back, a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. She reminded herself that this was part of the performance, but her body responded to his touch with an awareness that had nothing to do with acting. "Damien, wonderful to see you," called out a distinguished older gentleman with silver hair. "And this must be the lovely wife we've all been hearing about. Harrison, allow me to introduce Sienna," Damien said smoothly. "Sienna, this is Harrison Fletcher, CEO of Fletcher Industries." Sienna extended her hand with practiced grace. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Fletcher. Damien speaks highly of your partnership." "The pleasure is entirely mine," Harrison replied, his shrewd eyes assessing her with interest. "I understand you're an artist. What medium do you work in?" "Primarily ceramics," Sienna replied, relaxing slightly as the conversation moved to familiar territory. "I'm fascinated by the transformation that happens in the kiln, how heat and time can turn soft clay into something enduring and beautiful. There's a parallel to business, actually, the pressure and challenges you face in creating something from nothing." Harrison's eyebrows rose with genuine interest. "What an insightful observation. You know, my wife has been looking for someone to create custom pieces for our new home. Perhaps we could discuss a commission." As the evening progressed, Sienna found herself genuinely enjoying the conversations. She had worried about feeling out of place, but her authenticity seemed to resonate with people who were accustomed to artificial social interactions. She didn't try to pretend she understood technology or finance. Instead, she listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and connected with people on a human level that transcended business. Blurring lines during dinner. Seated at a table with several of Damien's key investors, Sienna felt his hand find hers under the table. It was a gesture they had practiced, a show of affection for their audience. But the way his thumb traced small circles on her palm felt intimate and real, sending shivers up her arm that had nothing to do with performance. "Your wife is remarkable," one of the investors, Thomas Chen, said to Damien. "You're a fortunate man. This kind of partnership, where both people support each other's passions, is rare in our world." "I know how lucky I am," Damien replied. And when Sienna looked at him, she saw something in his expression that made her heart skip. It wasn't the practiced look of a man playing a role. It was genuine appreciation, maybe even wonder. Later, as they danced together during the formal portion of the evening, Damien held her closer than strictly necessary. The ballroom was crowded, their movements restricted by other couples, but Sienna suspected that wasn't the only reason he kept her pressed against him. "You were amazing tonight," he murmured near her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "I've attended hundreds of these events, and I've never enjoyed one as much as this." "That's because you're usually working," Sienna replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the way her pulse was racing. "Tonight, you had someone to share it with. Is that what this is?" Damien asked, pulling back slightly to look into her eyes. Sharing, the question hung between them, loaded with implications that went far beyond their business arrangement. Before Sienna could answer, they were interrupted by another couple wanting to congratulate them on their marriage. Late-night confessions back at the penthouse. Neither of them seemed ready to retreat to their separate wings. They stood together on the terrace, the city lights spread out before them like scattered diamonds, neither quite ready to end an evening that had felt more real than either had anticipated. "I need to tell you something," Sienna said finally, turning to face him. "Tonight felt different. When we were dancing, when you held my hand, when you looked at me during those conversations, it didn't feel like we were acting anymore." Damien was quiet for a long moment, his expression difficult to read in the dim light. "I know. I felt it too. This is dangerous," Sienna continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "We agreed to keep this professional, to maintain boundaries, but I'm finding it harder to remember where the performance ends and reality begins. Would that be so terrible?" Damien asked, moving closer to her. What if the boundaries we set were based on fear rather than wisdom? Your fear or mine? Sienna challenged gently. Both, probably. Damien reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. I told you I didn't believe in love, that it was a luxury I couldn't afford. But being with you, even in this artificial arrangement, has made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. Sienna felt her breath catch in her throat. Damien, we barely know each other. What we're feeling might just be the intensity of the situation, the closeness of living together and performing this elaborate charade. Or it might be real, he countered. The most real thing I've felt in years. They stood there on the terrace, inches apart, both aware that crossing this line would change everything. The contract they had signed had seemed so clear, so simple, but nothing about what was happening between them felt simple anymore. I'm scared, Sienna admitted. I came into this thinking I could protect my heart, but I could keep professional distance while playing the role of your wife. But every day, I find myself caring more about you, not about your money or your lifestyle, but about the person you are when we're alone. The man who leaves me coffee with sweet notes. The man who set up that beautiful studio before I even agreed to this arrangement. The man who looks at my work with genuine appreciation, not just polite interest. The almost kissed Damien cupped her face in both hands, his touch gentle but intense. I don't want to hurt you, Sienna. I don't want to complicate your life or make you regret saying yes to this arrangement. But I also can't pretend anymore that I don't feel something real when I'm with you. Then don't pretend, Sienna whispered, rising on her toes to close the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that was nothing like the brief, performative touches they had shared at the gala. This was hungry and desperate, weeks of suppressed attraction and growing emotional connection pouring out in a single moment. Sienna's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer as his arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly off the ground. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the world seemed to have shifted on its axis. We should talk about this, Damien said, though his hands remained on her waist, as if he couldn't quite bring himself to let go. Tomorrow, Sienna agreed. Tonight, I just want to feel this without overthinking it. They kissed again, slower this time, savoring the sweetness of giving in to what had been building between them since that first meeting in the coffee shop. When they finally said goodnight and retreated to their separate wings, both knew that their arrangement had fundamentally changed. Next morning, Sienna woke to find a note slipped under her door, written in Damien's precise handwriting. Good morning. I have an early meeting, but I've been thinking about last night. We need to discuss what this means for our arrangement, but I want you to know that I have no regrets. Whatever we decide, you've already changed my life in ways I'm only beginning to understand. Coffee is waiting in the kitchen, and I'd like to take you to dinner tonight if you're willing. Not as part of our contract, but because I genuinely want to spend time with you. No performance, no audience, just us. Sienna held the note against her chest, a smile spreading across her face. She had come into this arrangement expecting a year of pretending, a business transaction that would give her financial freedom to pursue her art. Instead, she had found something infinitely more valuable and terrifying. She had found someone who saw her, truly saw her, and seemed to value what he found. Walking to her studio, she sat at her potter's wheel and began to work, her hands shaping clay with a new energy. The piece that emerged was different from her usual style, more fluid and emotional, capturing the complexity of what she was feeling. Hope mixed with fear, excitement tempered with caution, the beautiful uncertainty of two people discovering each other. As the clay took shape beneath her fingers, Sienna realized that whether this thing between her and Damien lasted beyond their contracted year or ended in heartbreak, she would never regret taking the risk. Sometimes the greatest art came from being brave enough to step into the unknown, and she was beginning to understand that the same was true for love. The unraveling 12 months into their arrangement, the line between performance and reality had dissolved completely. Damien and Sienna had stopped retreating to separate wings of the penthouse. Most evenings found them cooking dinner together, talking 4 hours about everything, from childhood memories to philosophical debates about art and commerce. They had been on their real dates, moments stolen between business obligations, where they could simply be two people getting to know each other. But the growing intimacy between them had created a new kind of tension. Neither had explicitly addressed what their relationship had become, both dancing around the obvious truth that they had fallen for each other. The contract still sat in Damien's office, a reminder of the business arrangement that had brought them together, but it felt increasingly irrelevant to what they were building. Everything came to a head on a rainy Thursday evening. Sienna was in a studio, working on a series of vessels for an upcoming exhibition at the Riverside Gallery, the same place where their fictional love story supposedly began. Her phone rang, displaying her mother's number, and she answered with clay-covered hands. "Sienna, honey, I need to talk to you about something important." Her mother's voice carried unusual tension. "I received a very strange call today from a reporter asking questions about your marriage to Damien. Cross, she seemed to think there was something suspicious about how quickly you two got married and moved in together." Sienna felt ice flood her veins. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that you and Damien are very much in love, and that your relationship is none of her business. But sweetheart, she mentioned something about investigating whether your marriage might be fraudulent, something about immigration or business fraud. What's going on?" After hanging up, Sienna sat frozen in her studio, clay drying on her hands, her mind racing through the implications. If a reporter started digging into their arrangement, everything could unravel. Damien's reputation would be damaged, possibly destroying the very business relationships he had hired her to help secure, and she would be exposed as someone who had essentially sold herself into a fake marriage, which would humiliate her family and destroy her credibility as an artist. Crisis meeting one. Damien arrived home that evening. He found Sienna pacing in the living room, her face pale with worrying. Within minutes, she had explained the phone call and her fears about what might happen. "We need to end this," she said, her voice shaking. "Before it becomes a scandal that ruins both of us. I'll move out quietly. We'll say the marriage didn't work out, and we'll part ways before anyone can prove anything suspicious." Damien stood very still, processing her words. "Is that what you want? To walk away?" "It's what makes sense," Sienna replied, though tears were streaming down her face. "This was always supposed to be temporary anyway. We both knew that going in." "That was before," Damien said quietly, moving toward her. "Before I fell in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. Sienna stopped pacing, her breath catching in her throat. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't say that now, when everything is falling apart." "I'm saying it now, because everything is falling apart," Damien countered, closing the distance between them. "I'm saying it because I realized something today during a meeting where I was supposed to be focused on quarterly projections. I realized that none of it matters. The business deals, the reputation, the carefully constructed image. None of it matters if I lose you." "The truth revealed." "You can't mean that," Sienna said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Your business is everything to you. You created this entire arrangement because you were losing deals." "I created this arrangement because I was a coward," Damien said, his voice raw with emotion. "I was so afraid of feeling anything real that I tried to buy a simulation of love, something I could control and keep at arm's length. But you didn't let me keep you at arm's length. You crashed through every wall I had built, and you made me remember what it feels like to be truly alive." He took her hands in his, not caring about the dried clay still clinging to her fingers. "I love you, Sienna Hayes. I love the way you see beauty in ordinary things. I love how passionate you are about your art, how you light up when you talk about the transformation that happens in the kill. I love that you're not impressed by my money or my achievements. You see me, the real me, and somehow you still chose to stay." "I stayed because I fell in love with you too," Sienna admitted through her tears. "I tried not to. I told myself it was just the intensity of the situation, that I was confusing gratitude for love. But it's real, Damien. What I feel for you is more real than anything I've ever experienced." They stood in the middle of the living room, holding each other as if they could shelter one another from the storm gathering around them. Outside, rain continued to hammer against the windows, but neither of them noticed facing the truth. "So what do we do?" Sienna finally asked, pulling back to look at his face. "How do we fix this?" Damien was quiet for a moment. Then a small smile touched his lips. "We tell the truth, the truth. Damien, the truth will destroy everything you've built." "No," he said firmly. "Lies might destroy what I've built, but the truth, the real truth, might actually save it. We tell people that we entered into an arrangement that was supposed to be purely professional. We admit that I was so focused on image and reputation that I made a foolish decision. And then we tell them what actually happened. That somewhere in the middle of pretending to be in love, we fell genuinely and completely in love with each other." "That sounds like a fairy tale," Sienna said. But hope was beginning to bloom in her chest. "Maybe it is," Damien agreed. "But it's our fairy tale, and it happens to be true. I don't want to build my business on lies anymore. I don't want to hide what we have or pretend it's something other than what it is. I want everyone to know that I'm madly in love with my wife, and that marrying her was the smartest business decision I ever made, because it taught me what actually matters in life." The press conference 3 days later. Damien called a press conference. His legal team had advised against it, warning him of potential consequences, but he was resolute. Sienna stood beside him as he faced a room full of reporters and business journalists. Her hand clasped tightly in his. "I called you here today because I want to address rumors that have been circulating about my marriage." Damien began, his voice steady and clear. "The truth is that my relationship with Sienna began as a business arrangement. I was losing deals because potential partners questioned my commitment and stability due to my unmarried status. So I made what I thought was a rational decision to enter into a contractual marriage with someone who needed financial support to pursue her artistic career." The room erupted with questions and camera flashes, but Damien held up his hand for silence. "What I didn't anticipate, what I couldn't have predicted, was that this arrangement would become the most important relationship of my life. Somewhere between the business dinners and the public appearances, I fell genuinely and completely in love with my wife, not because of the contract, but despite it. She saw through every carefully constructed facade I had built over the years, and showed me what it means to live authentically, to create something beautiful not for profit or image, but simply because it brings joy." He turned to look at Sienna, his eyes full of emotion. "I'm standing here today because I refuse to hide behind lies anymore. Our marriage may have started as a business transaction, but it has become the realest, most meaningful thing in my life. If that costs me business deals or damages my reputation, so be it. I would rather lose everything I've built than lose her." Public reaction. The press conference created exactly the media storm they had feared, but the response was not what either of them expected. While some criticized Damien's initial decision to enter into a fake marriage, many more were moved by the honesty of his confession. Social media exploded with support, with people sharing their own stories of unconventional beginnings to lasting relationships. Within a week, 3 of the investors who had previously expressed concerns about Damien's stability reached out to restart negotiations. Harrison Fletcher called personally to say that Damien's willingness to be vulnerable and honest in the face of potential ruin demonstrated exactly the kind of integrity he looked for in business. "Partners, you could have lied your way out of this," Harrison told him during their phone conversation. "You could have maintained the facade and protected your image. The fact that you chose truth over convenience tells me more about your character than any amount of due diligence ever could." The real wedding 6 months after the press conference. Sienna and Damien stood in the botanical gardens where they had spent many of their real dates, surrounded by close friends and family. This time, there were no investors to impress, no business deals riding on the success of the event. This was purely about two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way. celebrating their genuine commitment in front of the people they loved. Sienna wore a simple ivory dress that she had chosen herself, not from a stylist's selection, but from a small boutique that supported local designers. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Damien had picked that morning from the garden. When I proposed this arrangement, Damien said during his vows, his voice thick with emotion, "I thought I was solving a business problem. I had no idea I was actually solving a life problem. You taught me that love isn't a weakness to be avoided, but a strength that makes everything else meaningful. You showed me that vulnerability isn't something to fear, but something to embrace. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of the gift you've given me, the gift of your authentic, beautiful, imperfect, perfect self." Sienna smiled through her tears as she spoke her own vows. "I came into this thinking was making a practical decision to pursue my art, but what I found was so much more valuable than financial freedom. I found a partner who sees me completely, who supports my dreams without trying to control them, who challenges me to be braver and more honest than I ever thought possible. I promise to always tell you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. I promise to create space for both of us to grow and change. And I promise to love you, not despite your flaws, but because they're part of what makes you real." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, this time for real, their kiss was met with genuine applause from people who knew their whole story and loved them anyway. The exhibition were months after their real wedding, Sienna's first major solo exhibition, opened at the Riverside Gallery. The collection was titled Transformation, and every piece reflected the journey she had taken over the past year. There were vessels that captured the brittleness of her early fear, pieces that reflected the growing warmth of connection, and finally, a stunning centerpiece that embodied the strength and beauty of genuine love. Damien stood beside her as critics, collectors, and art enthusiasts moved through the space, his pride evident in every glance he cast her way. When a prominent museum curator approached to discuss acquiring several pieces for their permanent collection, Sienna squeezed his hand tightly, overwhelmed by how far she had come. "You did this," she whispered to him during a quiet moment. "You gave me the space and support to create this work." "No," Damien corrected gently. "I gave you time and resources. You had the talent and vision all along. I just removed some obstacles so the world could see what I saw from the beginning." As the evening progressed, Sienna found herself thinking about the terrified woman who had walked into that coffee shop a year ago, desperate enough to consider a stranger's outrageous proposal. She would never have believed then that she would end up here, standing in a gallery full of her own work, married to a man she loved deeply, living a life that felt authentic and full of possibility. Epilogue. 1 year later, on the anniversary of the day they had signed their original contract, Damien and Sienna sat on their terrace, watching the sun set over the city. Sienna was pregnant with their first child, her hands resting on the gentle swell of her belly. Damien had stepped back from some of his business responsibilities, choosing to spend more time at home and even taking an interest in creating art himself under Sienna's patient instruction. "Do you ever regret it?" Sienna asked, leaning against his shoulder. "Walking away from some of those deals, choosing this life over the one you had planned?" Damien wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. "Every single day," he said, and when she looked up at him in shock, he was smiling. "I regret every day that I lived before I met you. Every year I spent thinking that success was measured in quarterly profits and business acquisitions. But I don't regret a single moment since you walked into that coffee shop and called me out for being sad and lonely." "I didn't say that," Sienna protested, laughing. "You implied it strongly," Damien teased. "And you were right. I was sad and lonely. And I didn't even know it until you showed me what connection actually felt like." As darkness fell over the city and stars began to appear in the sky above, they sat together in comfortable silence. To people who had started as strangers with a business proposition and had somehow found their way to genuine, lasting love, their story had not followed any conventional path, but it was theirs, authentic and real, and more beautiful than any fairy tale, because it was true. The arrangement that was supposed to save Damien's reputation had instead saved his heart, teaching him that the greatest success in life has nothing to do with business deals or public image. It has everything to do with finding someone who sees you completely, who challenges you to be better, and who chooses to walk beside you through all of life's unexpected transformations. And for both of them, that was worth more than any contract could ever quantify.